And the skeptics mess with the confidence in my eyes. I'm seeing all the angles, thoughts get tangled. I start to compromise my life and my purpose.
Good evening and welcome to the Carolyn Holt Show. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I am excited about talking to you about the current climate of activism. I would say that the president, whether it's intentional or unintentional, he is fueling activism, whether he intended for that to happen or not. But, you know, America is at a crossroads, and I think that one of the things that we're going to have to really consider at this point is there are many things that are wrong. And the unfortunate thing is that when things need to change, there's never just a fast route to the solution. And I think that people in America have come to look to leadership to figure out what they're going to do in many instances, but they've been disappointed because in this current leadership, this person is all over the place, and so it's hard to get a sense of what should be done in many instances, because each day he comes out with some new information that just does not make sense. Not only to whomever his information is directed toward, but just the people that are casual observers of what's going on in the current climate. And so tonight, I think it is important to talk about all the issues that surround being an activist and being a person that believes in social justice, because life experiences are different for all Americans. No two people have the exact same life. And when you have so many people doing so many different things, it can look like a lot of confusion. And when it seems that there is a lot of confusion, often leadership steps in to add some clarity and to add some focus to the situation in many instances. At least that's what has been expected just based on the past and what the role of the president has been. But this particular president has fueled activism, I believe, because of his insensitivity to many things and his lack of knowledge about a lot of things, and his straight talk, no chaser attitude in terms of how he expresses himself. I know with men many times, tough talk, it sounds really good, and other men enjoy hearing tough talk, but you have to have some sense of reason if you're going to use tough talk and not just be insulting. And many of the comments that have been made by the president lately, that's what they are. They are absolutely insulting, and he keeps denying that he is not a racist, and he believes that that's true. But unfortunately, many times people don't pay much attention to what you say. They pay a lot of attention, however, to what you do. So tonight I'm going to be talking about how to make that happen, how to make activism happen in your own personal workplace without losing your job, because there are rules to the game. You just can't decide one morning you're going to go to work and become a social activist and turn the place out. I know sometimes you may feel that way, but there's a way to do it because there are rules and regulations to the game, and it's very important to know what they are. And for our show tonight, our working definition for social activism is an intentional action with the goal of bringing about social change. Anybody fighting for change in society. And I think that that's one of the beautiful aspects of our current climate, because anybody can fight for social change. You don't have to hold back when you have information that is useful and information that can bring about change in areas that should have been changed years ago. But in terms of social activism on your job, there are some things to consider before you delve off into the process. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in the beginning. And then later in the show, we'll talk more about how the current president and leadership might be misstepping when they don't have to be. Sometimes it simply takes listening and honoring what people have to say and why they believe they have to say it. You just can't automatically impose whatever your thoughts are about a situation, especially if you've never lived it. And I think that some of the issues that are showing themselves as a result of this particular president's leadership has to do with not knowing or not having a sense about the people that he's talking about. Because even if you have not had any training in leadership, you know that one of the things as a leader that you don't do just all willy-nilly off the top of your head is use inappropriate language. I don't know any person, whether they live in America or just around the world, no one just wants to arbitrarily be called an SOB. And to stand and deliver a speech using SOB as just some frivolous word that you throw around, I just can't wrap my brain around that, because as a leader, that's just not what you do. You have a strategy, and if more than anything, you want to sit down and communicate with people and find common ground in order to move forward. Not just take an opportunity to just push your agenda because you don't like how something looks. That's what dialogue and conversation is for. So, but before we get to that part, we need to deal with what the rules are regarding activism in the workplace. And I was looking at the National Law Review, and they had some interesting thoughts, and so I'm going to share some of them with you. It says that employees, political and social activism can be exhibited in many ways that impact the workplace. So you have to know that going in, is if you're seeking social change or social justice, there needs to be some strategy and a plan, not just your emotional feeling about something. Often the emotional aspect fuels the passion which gets the job done. But there's more than just emotion involved in bringing about change. And three of the areas to be aware of as an employee is unexcused absences, dress code implications or infractions, and cell phone violations. Because often you can make decisions that impact your job and you perhaps are not aware of it. So we want to think about the unexcused absences. Many times, if you are going to participate in a cause, it may require that you not be physically at your job. And so what you need to do before you make decisions such as unexcused absences is that you need to find out how your company handles unexcused absences. If these are disciplinary policies, if there are some disciplinary policies in place, you need to know them in advance because the employer has certain rights as well. And so it's a give and take situation, and you have to know what you're doing before you jump in head first. The important thing is to know in advance the policy and how you will be affected by it. If you take off from your job for social causes, no matter how necessary you see the absence to be, the law says that your employer bears burden in these instances because they need to avoid penalizing employees based on the message of the social or political cause. And essentially what they are saying is that employers need to have uniformity in terms of whatever their policy is, because the message in social causes is the main event. And you can't give permission to one group of employees to show their disdain or dislike for something and then say no to another situation. So you have to be consistent in terms of supporting the fact that the message is where you make your policy. Because if you don't, then you have a whole lot of circumstances in which some people receive an excused absence to do one thing and another group of people didn't, and that leads to discrimination charges many times. So it says that the recommendation and the safest course for employers to take is to apply the policies and work rules neutrally and avoid penalizing groups of employees. Because if one group of employees can go to a pro-life rally and another group wants to attend a pro-choice rally, if the employer allows one group to attend and the other, then there's chaos. So the goal and the intent should be that you remain neutral and that you pay attention to the message that you're sending. It's a lot like parenting, because there are no hard and fast rules regarding employers saying to you or coming to you and saying that you cannot participate in activism. But they do have to be careful because they don't want to violate some state issues that are already in place. In terms of the cell phone violations, it says that most companies don't allow for tweeting messages or chatting in support of social causes while being in the setting where employees perform their job duties. And that makes sense to me. You are at work because you are expected to be there to do a job. And while activism is important, more than likely your particular company, they have a time frame in which you can be an activist. And so you need to always check to see what that is. Now, I'm going to go to break, but when I come back, we're going to continue to talk about what you should know concerning your workplace before you take up your mantle and support your cause. Stay with me.
Mastering math can be big fun for you and everyone. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Sing, play it, Math Maze.
Why not turn math time into fun time with Math Maze, the new game craze? Get yours today at mathmaze.us.
Mom, now you can help your son master math and have big fun. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Sing, play it. Math Maze.
Make sure your child owns the skills necessary for success in high school algebra. Get it now. Mathmaze.us. Mathmaze.us.
And now you can help your daughter play it like you know you oughta. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Math Maze cards contain both Spanish and English. Get yours today at mathmaze.us. That's mathmaze.us.
Thank you so much for joining me for the Carolyn Holt Show. Tonight, we're talking about activism in the workplace and how you want to know what the company policy is regarding activism before you jump in with both feet. And we're talking about some of the important things to know before doing so. And the main three are unexcused absences and dress code infractions or violations and cell phone violations. And when I went to break, I was talking about using your cell phone at work in your workplace setting to tweet or post or whatever about some cause or social issue that you are currently engaged in. And the best thing to do is always consult the employee manual first, because while there may not be any hard and fast rules in place, you don't want to create a situation to where you're not able to have your say or have your ability to speak about injustices that you believe that are necessary to be talked about. In terms of the cell phone, it says that it can also be seen as a distraction, because when you think about it, if you're sitting at your desk tweeting and posting away, and if there's a situation to where other people can see what you're doing, then they think that it's okay for them to do the same. So the hard and fast rule is to not tweet and post while you're at your workstation. Now, if you want to take your lunch hour or your break or whatever and go to a designated area, because, you know, on most jobs, they have a designated space for lunch and for breaks and smoking and whatever else people do. So if you want to do those things in those common areas, that's fine. But the rule is not in your work space. And that makes sense, because you're at your job to do your job in a particular area. So just keep that in mind in terms of the cell phone. In terms of dress code violations, because sometimes people in protest of social issues, they may want to wear a certain color or wear a certain item in terms of protesting. And so, again, you have to know what the rules are. And The main issue, though, is with the colors. That's the number one sticking point for employers. Many times on jobs there is a dress code. If you work in a business, many times the color scheme is navy and black and brown and gray and white and pretty conservative. So if you come in with red on, it could cause a problem because that's not the dress code for whatever it is you do, especially if it's considered executive or on a management level. So, keep that in mind. The bottom line is that the employer has the right to manage political and social activism to protect and further its business interests while ensuring employees' rights and morale don't suffer. And most owners are just not going to let you affect their bottom line when it comes to the money and when it comes to the overall morale of your coworkers and employees. So don't be so strident in your view that you cross that line, because it's very important when you are passionate about something. It's very important to also understand where your rights begin and end, and especially in a workplace setting. So just keep that in mind. Unexcused absences, cell phone violations, and dress code. Keep that in mind when you have a cause that you want to passionately support. It also says that employees need to know this, that in California, Colorado, Louisiana, and New York, an employer cannot retaliate or discriminate against employees based upon their lawful off-duty conduct, which would extend to their off-duty social and political activism. And basically what they're saying is, if you, on the weekend, if you are spending your time at rallies or at causes, and they are not held on or near your workplace, that you have every right to do that. The only time that the retaliation and the discrimination may come into play is if you are using your workplace in any way to further your cause. So it is very important to know what the rules of the state in which you live, what they are. So again, always check things out before jumping in head first. But here in the state of California, you have every right to participate in activism on your own time. There should be no retaliation and no discrimination against you for doing so. So keep that in mind. But if you don't live here in California, it's something to make sure you have the facts before you start to act. Now, I was reading this article. It was in the Huffington Post. And this article was written by Tony Calandro. And his information, I think, is really good. It says that states that activism is on the his article states that activism is on the rise because employee attitudes have changed, and they want their CEOs and corporations to take a stand on important issues, and this position cuts across party and generational lines. Now, we do have to give the millennials a lot of credit because they are definitely tuned in when it comes to social causes. And like the article said, especially in terms of generational lines, cultural lines as well, because they've lived to see a different world than perhaps existed even 20 years ago, because change happens so fast these days. What the world was like 20 years ago, we are so far removed from that, and the millennials may not even have that world as a point of reference. And so they are very socially in tune, and when they take a job, it's not about just them having a job, but they hold the company accountable in a lot of ways, which perhaps didn't take place before. But in the last 20 years, things have really changed in the workplace, and there are some requirements. If you are a CEO these days, there are some requirements because people want to believe that the chief executive officer, he or she is engaged, and they are very much aware of the things that are going on. And Mr. Calandro says that a clear majority of employees, that would be 57% of employees, believe that their CEOs should be more vocal on key social issues. And I believe what he means by key social issues is that if it's trending and if it's in the news and it's gone viral on YouTube, then it's something that perhaps needs your position. In leadership class, if you've ever had a job where you worked as an executive in business, they often give you additional training, and you get sent to all of these training courses and seminars. And one of the things that they do in some of these courses is if you're going to be a leader, one of the things that they teach you is that you always need to let the record show where you stand. And initially, I was a little peeved by that. I was like, well, why can't I just keep my opinion to myself? And you can, but then you can't be an effective leader. Because when you think about it, the reason letting the record state where you stand is important, because when you need to choose teams and when you have special projects and when you're doing things, you need to know who it is that you need to have as part of your support group. So letting the record stating your position and letting the record show where you stand helps other people to know whether they're going to stand with you or not. So it's very important to be a leader of conviction, and that's becoming more and more of a requirement, because it says that 27% of employees believe that if necessary, you should pressure the CEO to be more vocal on social issues, not just speak out every once in a while, but make it part of the culture at your job. Now, I'm sure that many times the CEO, he doesn't want to hear that, but I do understand that you want to believe that if you are a person of conviction, you want to believe that where you work, also the leadership in that organization, they have convictions as well. So 27% actually believe that that's very important. It says that 45% indicate that the actions a company takes on important societal issues impact their employment decision. And what they mean by this is a lot of times when you go for a job interview, you want to know if you're working for a company that's considered progressive, or if you're working for a company where the rules are in place, they never change from year to year. They don't need you to be creative. They don't need you to be socially aware. They don't need any of those things. They just want you to come in and do your job. And for many people, that works out fine. But for young people in particular, that is, as they say, that's just not how they roll. And I understand that, because it is important to know where people stand. Now, it doesn't mean that knowing where they stand will give you an opportunity to change their minds. It might, but at least it helps in terms of strategy. So keep that in mind, that young people are watching, and they want to know how you're going to deal with societal issues that impact them in particular. They want to know if they've decided to pour their creativity into your product or whatever it is that your business is about. They want to know that they're going to be supported in their concerns as well. It's a mutual exchange. And many times people do have issues with mutual exchanges because they want their needs met, but they're not so good at meeting the needs of the other person. And I think that there's nothing more difficult than having a relationship with a corporation or an organization that never considers the thoughts or desires or concerns of the people that they employ. So just keep that in mind. It also says that 15% of all employees are dedicated activists, employees who regularly consume news on politics, expect to work for a company that makes meaningful attempts to address social issues. And when you think about it, we live in a world now where there is a 24-hour news cycle. There's never not a time, actually, when you can't get news from somewhere. I think CNN, I think they're on all night. I don't know, because I go to bed pretty early, so I don't necessarily know when the news cycle ends, but I know that we live in a 24-hour news cycle. And with employees who really are news junkies and they really like to know what's going on, they can have a lot of choices in terms of determining what's meaningful for them. Now, I do think that employees should certainly make their managers and the corporate brass aware of some of the things that's important. So if the management team knows that, okay, well, I'm sorry, I believe this is a worthy and worthwhile cause, we're not going to support it. I think both sides need to know that. Employees need to know that, and employers need to let employees know that, so that if it's a very important position that they want to take regarding whatever that is, they may think about that this is not a good fit in terms of them being employed. So I do think that dialogue in all of this is very necessary, and you have to be considerate of both sides, because the position may not mesh in the beginning. So in order for it to be mutually beneficial to both parties, you need to talk. It says, led by millennials, the activist segment tends to be younger, slightly more female than male, slightly more Democratic than Republican, and more with management positions than non-management. And I was very happy to hear that, because often when you are not in management, you kind of think that they are not aware of a lot of things and they're not paying attention, and they certainly perhaps don't have your best interests at heart. But according to the statistics, if the management team is led by a female, they are in tune. If it's led by younger people, and by younger, it's 50 and under, that's considered younger, and slightly more Democratic than Republican, well, I guess that's, if you're into politics, I guess that's important, because my feeling on that is Democrats, they have some shortcomings and frailties. Republicans have some shortcomings and frailties. And I'm for whatever is the right thing. And while many people register Democratic and they only vote in terms of what the Democrats say, that's fine. But I think that you have to be open-minded enough that if Republicans have a good idea about something, embrace it and find a way to fit it in. If Democrats have a great idea about something, find a way to embrace it and fit it in, instead of just name calling in terms of the Democrats being too liberal and the Republicans being too conservative. Find some common ground so that you can get past all of that and do what is in the best interests of the people, period. So just keep that in mind. But it is, I was excited to hear that people in management really do tend to be socially active. So that makes me happy. The report also says that at Fortune 500 companies. Now, I find this interesting because Fortune 500 companies, they're considered to be companies that have 50,000 employees or more. And so, it's not talking about small business. It's talking about a lot of people. It says that where it's a Fortune 500 company, that 30,000 employees, they expect that the CEO should be more involved when it comes to public and social issues, especially in terms of politics. Now, that surprised me. I thought that they would line up more on terms of the social end, but in terms of having a strong political view, as well as addressing social issues, that's what they expect from their CEO. It says that at Fortune 500 companies, 24,000 people say that their company's actions on societal issues impact their employment decisions. So they don't want to see a company just giving lip service to what they say they believe in. They want them to do things that cause impacts that cause an impact in a positive way. So keep that in mind. It says that 14,000 of the Fortune 500 employees think that CEOs have to be a lot more vocal on issues. And there are at least 8,000 dedicated activists in Fortune 500 companies. So they haven't been jaded by their position nor the power of the company. And so that's encouraging that there's a lot of activism in big companies. It also says that silence is not golden for CEOs. If the CEOs don't take a stance, employees take to social media and sometimes even volunteer negative information about the company on the services, I guess, like Yelp and other services where you can leave your thoughts about whether the company is something that you would recommend. So I think that is a wake-up call for CEOs, because I don't think in the past CEOs thought much about whether they should speak out on certain things or not. But the millennials have certainly changed that, and they don't think that not saying anything is the path that you ought to take. Now, according to the Washington Post, this is Jenna McGregor's column. She says that the current president has had a lot to do with the rise in social and political talk from colleagues at work. It used to be that, you were warned to not talk politics on the job. Politics, race, religion, those were, I guess, considered taboo subjects. But the recent behavior of not only the president, but some of the issues that he seemed to support has raised some eyebrows, and people are like, well, what in the world is he doing? It says that since his election, Better Works commissioned a survey that found employees have more social media distractions just based on his behavior alone. And when you think about it, that's true. I've noticed lately that when the morning news shows come on the air, they come on the air talking about what the president has tweeted and what he has had to say in terms of stirring the pot. And so I find it very interesting, because this is the first time in the history of the presidency that that's ever happened. Before he was elected president, often it was said that he wouldn't have access to be able to tweet every day. But somehow no one has been able to convince him that perhaps that's not the way to get the day started. But it's a new day, and he has decided that this is the way to stay on trend and engaged. And so daily, that's what we hear. Overnight, the president tweeted this and he tweeted that. So, but employees believe that this is a major distraction, because it doesn't send out a sense of well-being in America. It kind of keeps people on edge, because they don't know what he's going to say or do next. But I'm going to go to break, and when I come back, I'm going to finish up my list about the concerns of the current administration. Stay with me.
Mastering math can be big fun. Fun for you and everyone. Play it each and every day. Master Math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Why not turn math time into fun time with Math Maze, the new game craze? Get yours today at mathmaze.us.
Mom, now you can help your son master math and have big fun. Play it each and every day. Master Math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Make sure your child owns the skills necessary for success in high school algebra. Get it now. Mathmaze.us. Mathmaze.us.
Dad, now you can help your daughter play it like you know you oughta. Play it each and every day. Master Math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Math Maze cards contain both Spanish and English. Get yours today at mathmaze.us. That's mathmaze.us.
Thank you, Portis. I love your music choice. You're so good at that. But on tonight's show, we're talking about this current president and how he has shaken things up when it comes to activism. And before the break, I was talking about how he has had his thumbprint and his direct effect on how employees are feeling about social matters. It also says that political discussions in the workplace have escalated into arguments. And I stated earlier that, years ago that politics was just not something that you discuss on your job. But because of the erratic nature of things that are going on in the world these days, it has become actually the number one topic of conversation around the water cooler, at the desk, and in meetings, and wherever else you might be. It also says that more people are spending the workday hours reading posts about his comments and his politics, and that moods are heavier in the office due to all of the distractions. And I just find it hard to believe that is what he wants his legacy to be. His pledge was that he was going to be a unifier when he won the election. He wanted America to come together and be a common force for good. And it turns out, seemingly, he's been one of the most divisive aspects of all of that. And so America has not come together as people perhaps had thought they would. According to NPR, it says that everybody is upset for different reasons, and the current president is helping people to find common ground and find something that is worth fighting for. Now, I don't think that was his intent, but when you are faced with so many things that just don't make sense that he is responsible for, I guess in a roundabout way, it does have a positive effect in that people are not just taking things lying down anymore. And that's always a good thing. You should always stand up for what's right, even if it doesn't feel comfortable. But if it's the right thing, it's the right thing, no matter what the situation is. It says that the president's blustery style and take no prisoner attitude suits many, but offends more. And I think that that's what we have to give more credence to, is how offensive it is to the more. While it might excite his fan base, well, that's all well and good, but it is offensive and people are paying attention. It says his politically incorrect language is now starting to affect his own supporters who have businesses directly affected by his comments. In particular, the NFL. It says that the NFL is a major source of entertainment for fans, and many owners have taken a position and made it clear that the leader of the free world, who chooses to name call and determine who gets fired, has lost his mind, and they are not going to allow him to destroy their revenue streams. And you know what? If you really want to get the attention of corporations and businesses, follow the money, because people pay attention when money is involved. And I applaud the NFL. I mean, I'm not happy about everything that they do, but the owners realize that, listen, we cannot have somebody that's not directly affiliated with us destroy our industry. So I applaud them for that. There are a lot of things I'm not pleased about, but I do applaud them for that. Now, according to Steve Harvey, I don't remember how many years ago he made this statement, but I've thought about it ever since he made it, and I have to agree with this particular statement. He says that entertainment is the white man's God, and the owners of the NFL, they recognize that absolutely objectionable language can affect their bottom line faster than ever, and allowing the 45th president to get away with the name calling and the posturing that is on display is not at all acceptable. And when you think about it, entertainment is a huge moneymaker. When you think about all the different levels of entertainment, it makes a lot of money. And sports on Sundays alone is a staple. And so when you have someone that is not associated with your industry affecting your bottom line with name calling and showing that they are an ineffective leader, nobody's going to stand for that. So I believe that the calling the African American players SOBs, I think that that's the end of that, because nobody's going to stand for that, and it's not necessary. Actually, it's just very insulting. It says that athletes recognize the power their platforms have and how great their influence is with fans. And when it comes down to the truth of the matter, fans love athletes more than they do the president. That's just a fact. And so we can surmise with great authority that the president perhaps is going to lose this particular battle. It says that they refuse to buy into what is known as placism. In other words, the black athletes, you know your place. This is America, and you have to stand up and put your hand over your heart because you should believe like we do. Well, when experiences have been different from yours, the belief system is not the same. And so perhaps this is an opportunity to have dialogue and say, you know what, let me talk to you to get a greater understanding as to why you're taking the measures you're taking, instead of name calling and saying that you're a bad person just because I'm not in agreement with your position. It says that what the current president doesn't understand is that many of the SOBs he's talking about have lived a different experience from what he is espousing, and will use their platform to highlight the frailties and shortcomings in his platform, because they have a lot of power, and fans are interested in what their favorite players are doing. Chris Paul said it best. He said, I bet he wouldn't call these players SOBs to their face. And you know what? I'm on Chris Paul's team, because I don't believe that either. And I don't believe any decent human being would just walk up to another human being and say, you know, because of what you're doing, you're fired and you're an SOB, I don't think that he could take that. So don't do what you can't take. It says that the other problem is how patriotism gets viewed. Again, experiences in America decides patriotism, not rhetoric and bullying. That's what I say. That's my thought on it. Experience decides patriotism, not rhetoric and bullying. America has to own up to its obsession with money and greed. And just like in the 60s, when change happened, it happened because the money was affected. And that principle is still in place today. And if revenue drops below a comfortable line, we can rest assured, not only the NFL, but any other industry that is affected by the rhetoric and the tone of being a bully by the president, who is the leader. It just cannot be. That is not what America is about. And I think that people would not have a problem standing up, placing their hand over their heart if they believe a support system was in place to honor them. The causes that these people are supporting, a blind man could see them. You know, most of it stems from the treatment of young black males here in America. It is a problem, and it's one that needs to be addressed, because as I have said time and time again on this show, that if black police officers were killing young white males at the same rate that white police officers are currently killing young black males, we would have anarchy in the streets. So I applaud the teammates in terms of how they address through activism their position on all of these social issues. And I say that they have every right to do it in a respectful way. And putting your knee down is not any disrespect to the flag. That's my opinion. Well, I thank you so much for joining me for tonight's show. As always, our goal here is to move you from misery to magnificence and from subpar to spectacular. Good night, everybody, and join me again next week. Thank you.
Mastering math can be big fun for you and everyone. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it, Math Maze.
Why not turn math time into fun time with Math Maze, the new game craze? Get yours today at mathmaze.us.
Mom, now you can help your son master math and have big fun. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way.
Say it, play it.
Make sure your child owns the skills necessary for success in high school algebra. Get it now. Mathmaze.us. Mathmaze.us.
Dad, now you can help your daughter play it like you know you oughta. Play it each and every day. Master math the easy way. Say it, play it. Math Maze.
Math Maze cards contain both Spanish and English. Get yours today at mathmaze.us. That's mathmaze.us.
Hey yo, I remember Marvin Gaye used to sing to me. He had me feeling like black.